Namo tassa bhagavatu arahatu samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavatu arahatu samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavatu arahatu samma sambuddhassa. Good evening, everyone. Today is another Monday discussions day, and it's gonna be 78 Monday Sutta discussion. In today's discussion, we will be focusing on a couple interesting things. First and foremost, we will be talking about 4 individuals, just as we talked 4 individuals in our previous Monday Sutta discussion, but in a different way. And we also going to be talking about 2 very interesting aspects of spiritual life. On one side, it's going to be on whether sati, the practice of mindfulness, enough alone, whether the practice of sati is alone is merely enough for the spiritual development, and the other most interesting aspect is the most important way to practice, the most important way to feel Nibbana. So because Nibbana is an experience, so if the Nibbana is an experience, then it is not falling into the normal experiences that we have in our day-to-day life. So then what is that experience like, and what is the way how we know that this is Nibbana? Is it just mere understanding, or it is another type of experience? So all these are included in this sutta. So this sutta's name is Rahadacatukka Sutta, which appears in the Anguttara Nikaya's Chatukka Nipata, I would say 4.104. Okay, so in some translation, Uddaka Rahada has been translated as a pond. In other places, it has been translated as a lake. So I would use this popular term called lake in translating Uddaka Rahada. Okay, so let's take a look at the sutta in Pali. Chattaro me bhikkhave Uddaka Rahada katame chattaro. Monks, there are these 4 lakes. What 4? Somebody can say, monks, there are these 4 ponds or these lakes. What 4? Uttano gambhiro bhaso, gambhiro uttano bhaso, uttano bhaso, gambhiro bhaso. Imeko bhikkhave chattaro Uddaka Rahada. So this is a classification based on the nature of lakes, of a lake. So in translation, I would translate these 4 types of lakes this way. Uttano gambhiro bha. So this uttana, so the term uttana means shallow. Now you might perhaps remember this term in another sutta, in the Satcha Vibhanga Sutta, where Buddha explains the skills of Bhante Sariputta, Arhan Sariputta. Remember how his abilities were explained by the Buddha. Achikkana, Desana, Panyapana, Pattapana, Vivarana, Vibhajana, Uttani Kamma. So Uttani Kamma means any Dhamma preacher. Now when it comes to Venerable Sariputta, he is the top big, the Demos Dhamma teacher who can explain the Dhamma. So in his ability, he had this ability of making the deep Dhamma shallow. Now when you learn some of the Dhamma talks, I know that you might perhaps not understand, not because that the Dhamma talk is deep, but because your knowledge might not be adequate enough to understand that Dhamma talk. But sometimes even the Dhamma talk, the contents, not the content, I would say the presentation can be deep, deeper than your understanding. So it might not then be sensible for somebody to understand, in general. So that's why Uttani Kamma is an ability of a preacher, I would say, Dhamma teacher, Dhamma speaker. So the Dhamma speaker should be able to explain the abstruse, deep Dhamma matters in simple language, without distorting, without plaguing the specific context of the Dhamma. So Venerable Sariputta, Arahant Sariputta had this ability. So I am connecting that particular Pali term called Uttani Kamma into Uttana. So Uttano means basically flat or shallow. So there could be a lake which is shallow but appears deep. I mean, of course, there could be some lakes where you can't understand the real consistency of the lake by looking from outside. If you have a book, if you Google it, if you know from somebody, then you know. But if you just go randomly, and if you're gonna try to understand the level of water and how deep it is, it might not be realistic. So in that same way, there could be a lake which is shallow, but still it appears deep. That's the first type of lake. Second lake, Gambhiro Uttano Bhaso, so which is the other way around. There is a lake which is deep but appears shallow, right? There is a lake which is really deep, but it appears shallow. So Gambhira is deep, Uttano is shallow or flat. Third one, Uttano Bhaso. Now you can understand that the Pali term has been used at two places. That means shallow, right? So there is a lake which is shallow, appears shallow as well. The fourth lake is Gambhiro Bhaso. That means there's a lake which is deep and appears deep as well. That means the lake is deep, appears as deep too. So now there are four types of lakes. The first one is shallow but appears as deep. Second one is deep, appears as shallow. The third one is shallow, appears as shallow. The fourth one is deep, appears as deep. So now we're going to be looking at how Buddha compares these four lakes into different peoples. Eva meva ko bhikkhave chattaru me udakaraha dupama. That's the place where we can see the comparison of the four lakes into characteristics of people, temperaments of people. Puggala santo sangvijamana lokasmi katame chattaru. So these are the four lakes. In the same way, these four people, similar to lakes, are found in the world. What four? Uttano Gambhiro Bhaso, Gambhiro Uttano Bhaso. Uttano Bhaso, Gambhiro Bhaso. The same thing, right? Now Buddha explains the first person with that first lake. The first lake is shallow but appears deep. There could be a person who is shallow but appears deep. Katancha bhikkhave puggalo uttano hoti Gambhiro bhaso ida bhikkhave ekachassa puggalassa pasadikam hoti abhikhantam patikhantam alokitam vilokitam sammenjitam pasaritam sanghati patta chivara dharana. So idang dukkhanti yatha bhutam nappajanati ayang dukkha samudayo ayang dukkha nirodho ayang dukkha nirodha gamini patipadati yatha bhutam nappajanati evam ko bhikkhave puggalo uttano hoti Gambhiro bhaso setapiso bhikkhave Udaka rahadu uttanu gambiru bhasu tatupamaham bhikkave imang pukkalan vadami. Now, it appears to me that, I mean, you may have already checked the translation in English. It particularly says about people, in all these 4 types of people, how these people, develop their spiritual journey to attain Nibbana. So it is particularly about, the comparison of the lakes is particularly about how 4 types of people, attempt to journeying into Nibbana. So the first person, how is a person shallow but appears deep? It is when a person is impressive, pasadikam, when going out and coming back. That means abhikantam, patikkantam. When looking ahead and aside, patikkantam, alokitam, vilokitam. So abhikantam, patikkantam means going out and coming back, and you might know these terms in the Satipatthana Sutta under the Iriyapata and Sampajanya discussion. And when looking ahead and aside, that means alokitam, vilokitam. When bending and extending the limbs, samminjitam, pasaritam, pasaritam. And when bearing the outer robe, sanghating, bowl, and ropes. In Pali we say abhikantam, patikkantam, that means when going out and coming back. Alokitam, vilokitam means when looking ahead and aside. Samminjitam, pasaritam means when bending and extending, stretching out the limbs. Sanghati patta chivara dharanam. Now this is mostly about how the monastics are supposed to put their robes on, and then how they need to consume their requisites. So when it comes to them, and don't take it just as something only pertain to the monks, and it is relevant to all of us, because we all, not only the monks and monastic, but also everybody, they all get dressed, and they all carry other things. So when it comes to the Pali, Sanghati Patta Chivara Dharana, which means when bearing the outer robe, bowl and robes, when you getting dressed, when you're putting something on, at all times. So there is someone whose actions, like going out, coming back, looking ahead and aside, bending and extending limbs, when bearing dresses, when it comes to monastic, outer robe, bowl robes, and all those actions seem to be very impressive. Which means that particular person might be doing all that in a very impressive, mindful way. Now we're talking about these mindful behaviors under walking meditation and mindfulness. So somebody might be very mindful, so that his or her these activities look pretty impressive. But the problem here is, so idang dukhanti yatha bhutam na pajanati. There may be a person like this who might be very mindful, but he or she may not have understood what is dukkha, what is the cause of dukkha, and what is the cessation of dukkha, and what is the path which leads to the cessation or eradication of dukkha. So this understanding, panya side of that person's spiritual path has not still arisen, but still that person is at the mindfulness level. Now this is a big question. We're going to be looking at this question. Now a lot of people trying to practice mindfulness, but they don't know why they want to be mindful. mindfulness is not just a standalone practice that you just keep doing without a focus. So mindfulness has to be done with a focus. So the focus is to becoming wiser, become wise. So this wisdom is not that classic normal wisdom. This wisdom is vipassana. Vipassana is the key to get into panya. So panya is nibbana. So panya won't come to somebody who does not try to understand the Four Noble Truths, right? So with mindfulness, one has to have this aim even before one starts doing mindfulness. My aim is to attain nibbana. Sati is a practice which helps me getting in there. Sati is not my ultimate focus. Sati is my generic practice to attain nibbana. So if I can attain nibbana, this practice of sati will not make sense to me. I mean, that is the Buddhist idea, right? You can remember the people like the ascetics, pre-Buddhist ascetics. They had this samatha bhavana, right? They were able to attain different rupavachara material and arupavachara immaterial jhanas, but that's what not we expect in the Buddhist teachings. Buddhist teachings is, well, we need samatha, we need to keep us calm, but that's not our focus. If that was the focus, then Bodhisattva might have stayed with those teachers, Alara Kala Muddaka Rambuddha. So he didn't want to stay with him after he understood that this is their focus. So he wanted to find out panya. So panya is our focus. Samadhi, I mean, this whole mindfulness practice should focus attaining nibbana. That means getting into that panya. We talked about this panya at different times. The panya in the Buddhist teachings means three types of panya: sutta-me panya, chinta-me pranya, and bhavana-me pranya. Sutta-me panya means listening to Dhamma, just as how you've been doing like this. And chinta-me panya is rationalizing your Dhamma knowledge. And it's not, Dhamma is some people may have this misunderstanding. Nibbana is illogical. Nibbana, you can't make it a logical point, because Nibbana is not subject to rationalization logic. But everything before Nibbana, I mean, you should have this rationalizing perspective to understand. But rationalization is not the truth. But you need rationalization. You need logical understanding. You need this rational understanding about what I'm doing. What is my focus? You need this rationalization to some extent. But rationalization is not our focus. But rationalization is a good means, good epistemology, good methodology to check out whether I'm in the real focus. So mindfulness is something which helps us to get into panya, which means nibbana. But do not just end up in mindfulness. You need to keep that going up until you become wise in the Buddha, as it was given by the Buddha. Okay, so the first person who is compared to a lake which is shallow but appears deep is the person whose actions seem to be pretty mindful, but she does not try to understand the Four Noble Truths. So that's a big failure in that person's practice. So what do you think about a lake which disillusions you, appearing to be deep, but in reality that lake is really shallow? So there could be someone like that whose actions could be very mindful, but his or her focus is not into nibbana. So we call this nibbanic understanding is not trying to understand the Four Noble Truths. And we're going to be talking what is this understanding like. So what is it, the literal understanding? Is it a contextual understanding? Or is it, what is this understanding like? We're going to be talking that at the end, but for the moment we'll be explaining these four people, and then we'll be getting into them after. Second person. Katancha bhikkhave puggalo gambhiro hoti uttano bhaso ida bhikkhave ekachchassa puggalassa na pasadikam hoti abhikkanta patikkanta alokitam vilokitam samminjitam pasaritam sanghati patta chivara dharanam so idang dukkhanti yatha bhutam pajanati ayang dukkha nirodhagamini patipadati yatha bhutam pajanati evanko bhikkhave puggalo gambhiro hoti uttano bhaso setabhiko so bhikkhave udakarhadu gambhiro uttano bhaso tatupamaham bhikkhave imam puggalam vadami. Now this is the other way around. So if you take a person who is really trying to understand what the Four Noble Truths are, but his or her actions don't seem to be very mindful. I mean, this is something we always get caught up, right? We will fall prey to. Now, for example, I would say there are people whose actions don't seem to be pretty impressive to us. I mean, this person is not mindful, when that person is talking, he's not mindful, she's not mindful, and talking and doing other things, you might feel like, oh, this person is not mindful. But that person might be already into the understanding of what the Four Noble Truths are. That's very important, right? I mean, a spiritual journey which is supposed to end up in Nibbana in someone's life is to end up at the Samadhi practice, end up at the mindfulness practice. Is not that great when it comes to someone whose mindfulness practice is not, surfacely not good, but his or her real understanding about the Four Noble Truth is to be good. So understanding of the Four Noble Truth is the most important thing. So somebody may argue, then doesn't the practice of mindfulness help anyone to understand the Four Noble? Yes, it is. But what about if someone only trying to be mindful and not trying to understand the focus of that mindfulness? That is a problem. So this is kind of a structural problem of one's spiritual path, right? Also, I would say, because people are different, we talked that in the last discussion too, because people are very different, we don't need to judge people, and as Buddhists we should be the least judgmental people in this earth. We are supposed to be. I don't know, how does that apply to all of you? Because Buddha says you can't have any prejudgments, preoccupied thoughts about individuals, because individuals can be understood just by the mere behavior, but just by noticing, observing their normal behaviors, because we don't know what's going on in their mindset. That's why I'm telling you, simply because someone's actions and deportment or behavior seem not to be impressive, do not try to judge that person. Oh, this person is not into the spiritual practice. Who knows? This person may have already been into the understanding of the Four Noble Truths. That's the most important thing. But if the understanding of the Four Noble Truth is going to work with mindfulness, that's really nice. But it doesn't mean that the person whose actions are not impressive and simply because his actions are not impressive, but if his if the attempt to understand the Four Noble Truth is going well, we can't say that person is a bad person. That person is not into the real spiritual focus. So our focus is to be wise, that particular wisdom in the Buddhist teaching. We need to practice mindfulness in order to become wise, and that should be our focus. So the second person is someone whose understanding of the Four Noble Truths is great, but his or her actions might not seem impressive to someone who only have a textual understanding about the Buddhism. Third person. Katancha bhikkhave puggalo uttano hoti uttano bhaso ida bhikkhave ekachassa puggalassa na pasadikam hoti abhikkantam patikkantam alokitam vilokitam samminjitam pasaritam sanghati patta chivara dharana. So idang dukkhanti yatha bhutang nappajanati ayang dukkha nirodha gamini patipadati yatha bhutang nappajanati evam ko bhikkhave puggalo uttano hoti uttano bhaso seyatapiso bhikkhave udakarahadu uttano bhaso tatupamaham bhikkhave imang puggalang vadami. Now the third person has nothing in terms of the mindfulness and this panya, understanding of Four Noble Truths. So he is neither involved in the practice of mindfulness nor the understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Fourth person, which is the lake, the lake which is deep appears deep. The one that we just finished talking about, the lake which is shallow and appears shallow. Now, the fourth lake is the one that we're going to be talking about now, comparing to a person. Katancha bhikkhave puggalo gambiro hoti gambiro bhaso. Ida bhikkhave ekachassa puggalassa pasadikam hoti abhikkantam patikkantam alokitam vilokitam samminjitam pasaritam sanghati patta chivara dharana so idang dukkhanti yatha bhutang pajanati ayang dukkha nirodha gamini patipadati yatha bhutang pajanati evam ko bhikkhave puggalo gambhiro hoti gambhiro bhaso seyatapiso bhikkhave udakarahadu gambhiro bhaso tatupamaham bhikkhave imang puggalang vadami, which means the last lake. There's a lake which is deep, appears deep. So the person is someone whose actions, like going out, when that person is going out, coming back, looking ahead, aside, bending, extending limbs, bearing dresses, they all look to be very impressive. They all look to be very nice. Very impressive to all the people. Also, his or her attempt to understanding, practice of understanding the Four Noble Truth is also very praiseworthy, is also very interesting. So she has the both side. So that's the last lake, which is deep, appears to be deep. If someone is to ask me what kind of persons that I'm recommending out of these, I would say a person who has the both mindfulness and the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, because we are living in a society, we don't need to give bad impressions, bad vibes to other people, right? So that's why we don't need to live a life just to please other people. We need to live a life to take care of us, to take care of the other people, while practicing mindfulness as well as trying to understand the Four Noble Truths. So trying to understand the Four Noble Truths is our focus. Okay, now I'm getting into the most interesting aspects of this discussion. The things that have been arisen as a matter of the sutta. Now, Dhamma friends, I already emphasized the understanding of the Four Noble Truths is very important, because if you can remember the first sutta that we know in the canonical references, I mean, canonical references have been, compiled by different monk scholars and non-scholars. But we know that the first sutta that Buddha, taught was the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. In this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Buddha, presented the Four Noble Truths, as in summary, because we know that the Satcavibhanga Sutta is the one in Majjhima Nikaya, which appears in the Majjhima Nikaya, is the full analysis, the complete analysis of the Four Noble Truths. But when it comes to the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Buddha says couple insightful things about the Four Noble Truths this way. Buddha says that the first truth. Now, before we getting into these terms, I wanna bring this to you. What is dukkha? Is dukkha suffering or dissatisfaction, or what is dukkha? Now, this is kind of a chaotic and debated term. I would say dukkha is pain, but pain is kind of a loose term to use for dukkha. Dukkha basically means dissatisfaction, because if it is suffering, then you are not you are not trying to take it as something good. I think what happens to many of us is dissatisfaction. When we look at dukkha from a very normal life perspective, but it could be suffering to some, depending on the level of that pain. But basically, we can say dukkha is dissatisfaction. So there are many things that we find unsatisfactory for us in our daily life. But we don't think that just because they are unsatisfactory, just because the sensual pleasures are unsatisfactory, we need to make a shift. We don't. I don't think a lot of people do that. But when it comes to a very high point, they might think, okay, no, I'm gonna make a big shift at this point, but I can't take it anymore. So that's something to think about. But basically, I would translate dukkha to be dissatisfaction or unsatisfactoriness. But I know there is pain. So when it comes to the Four Noble Truths, we know the first truth is the basic explanation of the dukkha. We call it dukkha Arya Satya, the noble truth called dukkha. Now, this is where we have to perceive, analyze, and examine the dukkha, right? There are different types of dukkhas, right? We call it jati dukkha. Birth is painful. Jarapi dukkha. Decay is painful. And decay, when you have this decay from different levels, you don't take it as painful. But when it comes to different life stages, you might find this is absolutely painful, and then embarrassing at some points. You are trying to find out how to get rid of this decay and the maturity, especially physical maturity. So, and sickness is dukkha, death is dukkha, yam pichchang labodhita. I think that is what happens to many of us, right? We are expecting some, plans to happen in this way, that way, but they don't happen the way that we want. So we call it yam pichchang labodhitampi dukkha. So we are expecting, our expectations don't go the way as we expect. So, sankitena panchapadana kanda dukkha. So everything that is, arisen because of the five aggregates. We call it panchapadana kanda, means basically this, what you call, clinging base, five aggregate. Everything that is arisen based on this clinging related five aggregates is dukkha. So now this is what we understand, the basic type of dukkha. So this dukkha has to be perceived, has to be analyzed, has to be examined. I don't know how many of you doing that. Have you ever thought to perceive this, whether this is dukkha or not? Have you ever tried to analyze your dukkha, unsatisfactoriness? Is this unsatisfactoriness? Is this a dissatisfaction? Have you ever thought that way? Is this something that I have to, think about, whether I'm really, happy to understand, I'm happy to feel it, or I don't like it, I dislike it. So then there should be something that I don't like. So in that way, have you ever tried to, examine, perceive, analyze this dukkha? So that is the first one. So that is what we call, this first truth has to be perceived, analyzed, examined. We have a Pali word for that called pariññaya. So pariññaya means, perceived, analyzed, and examined. When it comes to the second noble truth, dukkha samudaya satya, we know that is the cause of, dukkha. We know that is where we understand the craving, tanha. Now, what is tanha? A lot of people misunderstand tanha. They think tanha basically means kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. So craving for sensual pleasures, kama tanha. Bhava tanha is craving to become, to becoming, and to becoming means to be born in, next life, the other life. So, there is no ending of samsara. So that is a tanha. And the third tanha is vibhava tanha, craving, for not becoming. There are some people who don't believe a life after this. So all these are three types of tanha. But when it comes to paticca samuppada, dependent origination, you might perhaps see that there is tanha. Avijja paccaya sankara, sankara paccaya vijnana, vijnana paccaya namrupam, namrupa paccaya salayatana, salayatana paccaya passu, passa paccaya vedana, vedana paccaya tanha. But that tanha is not kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. That tanha means rupa tanha, saddha tanha, gandha tanha, rasa tanha, pottabha tanha, dhamma tanha, which means craving regarding all the sensual pleasures. Now, when people perceive rupa for a long time, when people perceive saddha, that means sounds for a long time, images for a long time, rupa. When people perceive gandha for a long time, that means smell. When people perceive rasa for a long time, it means taste for a long time. When people perceive pottabha for a long time, that means contact. When people perceive Dhamma for long, Dhamma means not the teaching of the Buddha, Dhamma means thoughts at that point. When people have a consistent type of thoughts for a long time, then what can happen is that they might, automatically, they might inadvertently, unintentionally, or I would say not unintentionally, they might inadvertently fall prey to the different types, patterns of those six pleasures. And then they might not understand that whether we are still at a certain, early stage of pleasure, or whether we are into a full-blown tanha. So I think, sensual pleasures of many people have already become this full-blown tanha of each sensual category, which is a pretty big deal, right? Now, for example, I would say, if you think that I only want to see this person every day, I only want to see this particular thing every day, I want to hear this particular song every day, I want to smell this particular smell every day, if I think I want to taste this specific food every day, if I want to think that this mentality is the mentality that I want to be with every day, then over time you might perhaps not know that you have been taking it to a level of tanha. So that's what we call, when it comes to Paṭicca, which means dependent origination, tanha in that context means not kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. In theory, it means craving of 5, 6 sensual pleasures. But when it comes to the second noble truth, it covers everything, which means sensual pleasures, craving for sensual pleasures, it's kama tanha. Bhava tanha is, now what is bhava tanha? If you expect to be born in good places after you die, you are into bhava tanha. You have bhava tanha. Right? How many of you think about you want to attain Nibbana, you want to attain Sotapanna before you die? Right? That's pretty interesting. That is being the real Buddhist. That is being the person who we call Arya Savaka. Because if you have this thing that, okay, I want to be reborn in this place, that place, then you have this bhava tanha, because you are still having this tanha. That's why when you attain Nibbana, you need to eradicate even the thoughts of being born into Rupa Lokas, Rupa Raga and Arupa Raga, right? So we should not be able to keep thoughts to be reborn in these places, those places. You don't need to worry about your destinations. What you need to worry about is whether you can attain Sotapanna or not. That should be your only worry. But I don't think many of you are worried about it because of the cultural, I would say, socially constructed, deterritorialized type of Buddhism takes you to those destinations. But I respect those practices. But I'm trying to tell you that as someone who already became an Arya Savaka, who want to be an Arya Savaka, your prime goal is to attain at least a Saddhanusari, Dhammanusari, or Sotapanna before you die. Keep that as your only focus, the main focus, and the rest, being born into this cosmological place, that cosmological place, that is out of the Buddhist practice. Because if you keep that, that means you have bhava tanha. You are not trying to attain, you are not trying to understand the second truth, dukkha, samudaya, arya satya. The third the second arya satya, we use a word called pahatabba. That means you need to eradicate, abandon these 3 types of craving. When it comes to nirodha satya, dukkha nirodha arya satya, that means the noble truth call, the eradication of dukkha. Now at that point, you are eradicating, abandoning dukkha, right? That is the perfect, I wouldn't say it a place, then you might say it's a destination. I would say it is a stage. I would say it's a stage where you try to understand everything. Your perfect understanding blooms at that point. And the fourth noble truth is dukkha nirodha gamini padapada arya satya, which means the path which leads to the cessation or abandonment or eradication of dukkha. So that is to be practiced, bhave tabba. The previous one is satchika tabba. Bhave tabba means, yes, we need to practice the path. What is that path called? It is called Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, so that's clear to all of you. But why not many people successful in this practice? The reason is they do not know that this practice has to be done in 12 ways. We call it Tipari Vatta Dwadasakara. So this practice, the Eightfold Noble Path and this whole Four Noble Truth has to be practiced in 12 ways. That is what we understand from the Dhamma Chakkapada Sutta. Tipari Vatta Dwadasa. So there are 3 main categories and 12 ways to practice those 3 categories. The first one is Kichchanyana. Now, how do I make it simple for you? Let me think about it. Different simple way. Now, the first category is Kichchanyana. Kichchanyana basically means knowing the nature of the truth. Now, the first thing what we have to do is not just to understand it in a literal way, right? Now, a lot of people understand the Dhamma in the literal way, right? But Dhamma is not literal. Dhamma has different contextual meanings, right? So the first thing is knowing the nature of the truth. How do we know the nature of the truth? We need to bring it to our experiences. If we don't bring it to our experiences, dukkha, we will never understand it. Otherwise, it will be just a book-based thing. The second category is Kichchanyana. Kichchanyana means, now when you know the nature of the truth, then you are coming to a point where you know what needs to be done in connection with the truth. Now, there's a methodology of what you need to do, supposed to do after you know the nature of the truth. Mere knowing is not enough, right? This is what we know, like when something really bad happens, people might say, mere prayers are not enough. We need to do something, because this might happen again, right? Prayer is okay, but we need to go beyond the prayers too. So in the same way, when it comes to understanding the panya, what we discuss in the suttas, we need to know the nature of the truth, and then we need to know what needs to be done in connection with the truth, right? In terms of understanding. That is called Kichchanyana. The third category is Kichchanyana. Kichchanyana is accomplishing what needs to be done. Now, this is kind of an accomplishment. When you are into Panya, Nibbana, you understand that I have already done this accomplishment. I have already attained. You have this particular jnana at that point. There are examples for these three categories, and then we will talk about how these three categories become 12 as the Parivata Dwadasaka. Kichchanyana has examples like acknowledgement, view, and reflection. Now, when it comes to Kichchanyana, and as I told you, it is just knowing the nature of the truth. So you need to acknowledge your dukkha. If you don't acknowledge that things didn't go as planned, birth is dukkha, decay is dukkha, death is dukkha, association with people that you don't like is dukkha, dissociation with the beloved is dukkha, then how do we understand? So we have to bring this knowledge-based, textual understanding into an experiential, empirical level of understanding. That's what we have to do with acknowledgement, which is what we know by Kichchanyana. The second thing is view. Our view should be focused on to that. Reflection, yes, when you have acknowledgement, view, then you need to reflect upon your experiences with the first truth. Examples for the second category is Kichchanyana, knowing what needs to be done, practice, motivation, direct experiencing. Yes. Now, when you acknowledge, when you reflect, then the immediate thing you need to do is to practice. You need to be highly motivated by those drives, and you need to see how you can experience it directly, and then result, full understanding, knowing is what will happen to you when you attain Nibbana. Now, how do these three categories make up 12? Kichchanyana, Kichchanyana, Kichchanyana. So, Dukkha, Ariya Satya, the first noble truth, has Kichchanyana, Kichchanyana, Kichchanyana. So, you need to know the nature of the Dukkha, Ariya Satya, the first truth. You need to understand what needs to be done, what needs to be done in connection with the truth. That is called Dukkha, Ariya Satya with Kichchanyana. And Kichchanyana is accomplishing what needs to be done in terms of dukkha Arya Satya. In the same way, these three categories relate to the other three truths. Dukkha Samudaya Arya Satya also has Kichchanyana, Kichchanyana, Kathanyana. Dukkha Nirodha Arya Satya also has Kichchanyana, Kichchanyana, Kathanyana. Dukkha Patipada Dukkha Patipada Arya Satya, Gamini Arya Patipada Arya Satya also has Kichchanyana, Kichchanyana, Kathanyana. So that way it will become 12. Finally, I want to talk about something very interesting. Now, I sort of brought this up at the beginning of this talk. What is Nibbana? Now, a lot of people talk about Nibbana mostly in the literal sense. Is it an understanding, or is it just an experience? It could be, or is it the both? In one reference, we find out this way: Vediya manasa ko anahang bhikkhave idang dukkhaṃ kim paññapemi ayang dukkha samudayoti paññapemi ayang dukkha nirodhoti paññapemi ayang dukkha nirodha gamini patipadati paññapemi. Translation: to one who experiences sensations, Vedna, meditators, those who practice, I teach the truth of dukkha, I teach the truth of the rising of the dukkha and the rest of the two truths. That means Vedana is a big part of this conversation, this discussion of the Four Noble Truths. Because now, in normal discussions, conversations, a lot of people talk about Nibbana as a sukha, as a happiness. So happiness, when you talk about happiness, you can't then talk about happiness without a feeling. But in the Rathavinita Sutta, we know, Nibbana is a phenomenon where you can't find the normal feeling. And then the monk called, I think, Punamantaniputta, Arhan Punamantaniputta, questions back from Sariputta, Arhan Sariputta, if there is no happiness in the Nibbana, then how come it could be a better happiness? And Arhan Sariputta says, that is the happiness. When you don't have a feeling towards anything, when you don't judge the feeling, that means that is the deepmost happiness. But the problem here is, is the sensation the only way to understand the Nibbana? Now, this is another passage about it. In this passage, the passage I just mentioned, the Buddha clearly states that the Four Noble Truths can be understood, realized, and practiced only through the experience of Vedana. Now, we also know what we call by Nirodha Samapatti, and wherein Buddha sort of temporarily abandons or block the functioning of Sanya and Vedana, Sanya, Vedayita, Nirodha, right? So Vedana is very connected to this experience of Nibbana in that way. Yang kinchi Vedayitang tampi dukkasmi. Whatever sensations Vedana one experiences, all are suffering. Not only dukkha Vedana, Sukha Vedana, Dukkhama Sukha Vedana. Now, when we talk about any Vedana, they all are subject to changes. So we can't expect there is any Sukha Vedana, even by experiencing Dhamma, because that Sukha Vedana should be something which is out of, Nitya Dukkha, Nitya Sukha and Atta, right? It should be Anitya Dukkha Anatta. So when you understand these contexts, Nibbana is both an understanding and a different experience. And this experience is not a generic, normal, secular experience. It is an experience where you are not judgmental about your sensations, and you are looking at that sensation with your yoniso manasikara. Now, the reason why I brought up all these things is that I wanted to tell you what is meant by someone who understands or who doesn't understand the Four Noble Truths by Yatha Bhutang Pajanati and Yatha Bhutang na Pajanati. So we need to understand the Four Noble Truths in its in their entirety. And Yatha Bhutang is what we call the reality. So if we don't understand the Four Noble Truths in their reality, then our mindfulness practice doesn't make any sense. And we should be not able to literally understand Four Noble Truths just in a literal sense. We should be able to experience the Four Noble Truths, bring that literal understanding into our literal experiences, as well as acknowledging our personal dukkhas, social dukkhas in our understanding, and then also try to understand, figure out different tanhas we have, and then try to abandon them by following the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is what this sutta is all about. So basically I would say there are 4 lakes that Buddha identifies comparing to people. So people are based on mindfulness practice as well as understanding the Four Noble Truth. So the nature of shallow is compared to someone who has a mindfulness practice, and the nature of being deep is compared to someone who is understanding the Four Noble Truth. So ideally speaking, I would encourage you to become a person who has both mindfulness practice as well as trying to understand as much as you can this Four Noble Truth in their entirety by bringing those Noble Truths into your life, to connect, tap into those experiences with the Four Noble Truths under 3 categories and with 12 avenues, with 12 aspects of the Four Noble Truth, Noble Form. So that's what I wanted to tell you today. I don't think there is any question for today, and if there are no questions, let's wrap this up. May all the good karmas we've been accumulating so far be helpful towards different good causes. The first thing is to share all the good karmas with the departed relatives. May all the departed relatives who passed away in the name of all of us, sharing all these good karmas, may they be happy and peaceful, may they attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Idammi ñāti nang hutu sukhita huntu ñātayo. Idammi ñāti nang hutu sukhita huntu ñātayo. Idammi ñāti nang hutu sukhita huntu ñātayo. May all the devas, nagas also share in all these good karmas. May they be happy and peaceful. May they also protect all of us and the Sambuddha-sasana. May they also attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Ittavata cha ammehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti sindhya akasattha chibummattha deva naga mahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkhantu lokasasanang chirang rakkhantu desanang chirang rakkhantu mang paranti. Finally, let's make a great wish. May all the good karmas we've been accumulating in all these ways be helpful, all of us to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I'm going to be blessing you with a couple more stanzas. Please receive the blessings. Abhivadana silisse nichang vadha pachayino chattaro dhamma baddhanti ayuvanno sukhang balang ayurarogya sampatti sangha sampatti mevacha atu nibbana sampatti iminati saminjatu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. You know that the Abhidhamma for Daily Life series, which is a part of this Dhamma Paṭisota, is continuing, and in this week's discussion, Wednesday's discussion, I'm going to be talking about Paches, 24 Paches, which appears in the Paṭṭhānappakana, because Paches are very important, because the connection between each Dhamma matter, even in the Four Noble Truth, even in the Eightfold Noble Eightfold Path, even in the Panchakanda, there is a connection between every Dhamma, Rupa to Vedna, Vedana to Sanya, or Ditti to Sankappa, Sankappa to Vacha. They all go with Paches. Without Paches, they are not, dependent. Because in the Dhamma, everything is dependent, there are no independent Dhamma factors. So please stay tuned for that discussion too. That's going to be on Wednesday, 9 a.m. from Ottawa time, and you can see the YouTube video later. It's going to be on Wednesday evening from Malaysian time, I think, 9 p.m. Somebody asking a question. Good morning, Bhante. What's the sutta name? The sutta's name is Uddaka Rahada. Uddaka Rahada Sutta. That's in the Anguttara Nikaya, and you can see the link in this post. You can click on that link, Sutta Abstract, and you can see the sutta. Sutta is called Uddaka Rahada Sutta, which is Anguttara Nikaya 4.104. Okay, thank you. Have a good night. Take care. May be well and happy too.